I had him take the front row out because I'm going to go straight across over there. My son's back here on the camera. He wanted to film me, so it's like he told me I was going to have to wear makeup. I had a nightmare about lipstick last night, but then it's like he forgot, okay? And when I woke up this morning, I almost painted my nails, but oh well. So go with me to the Garden of Eden. Man has sinned. God placed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. There was total purity there. There was not one single weed in the whole place. Nobody had ever done anything wrong yet. And then Satan comes and tempts them, and they fall. And God comes looking for them, and they're hiding, and they know they're naked. And he says, "Who told you that?" And it's like, did you eat of the tree? And then they start blaming each other. It's like, this is the inherent nature of sin, is to place blame on somebody. It was the serpent's fault. It was the deceiver's fault. It's like Satan made me do it. It's like she gave it to me and I ate. And Eve's going like, yeah, but he didn't tell me the whole truth. It's like I just wasn't supposed to. I could have touched it, but once I touched it, I thought, okay, well, it's too late. But he didn't really tell me right. And then they're all cursed. So the woman's curse is increased pain in childbirth. It's like that's still going around. The man was like, you're going to have to work for your bread, and the ground is now going to bring forth thorns and thistles. I should have taken the picture of the stinging nettle that was about this big, about that tall in my yard a few years ago. It looks so awesome. It's so green, and there's these little yellow flowers all over it, and then you get real close, and you see all the stickers sticking up, and it's like, it's God's metaphor for what sin is like. It looks really good, and it's going to hurt you really bad. And then the devil is cursed. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head. You will strike his heel. So it's like the war is on. The seed of the woman, the seed of Satan. The seed of Satan is anybody that he can get to come over and join him. He takes this really seriously. He's going to get his head crushed. And whoever crushes it, it's only going to bruise him on the heel. So Satan is like, okay, the fight is on. Adam and Eve have two sons, Cain and Abel. They both make a sacrifice. Cain's is not accepted. Abel's is. Makes Cain mad. He draws his brother out into the open. He kills him. He buries him in the ground. God comes and says, where's your brother? And he says, am I my brother's keeper? And God curses him and banishes him. Cain says, everybody's going to try to kill me. He marks him. And off he goes. And Satan is like, from two seed to one seed. Now all I have to do is worry about Cain, and I own him. Satan almost had won. Then Seth is born. Seth is the next son. A few generations pass. They were really old back then. It's like they were having kids when they were 500 and 600 years old. It's like, oh boy. And then in chapter 6 of Genesis, it says that the daughters of men married the descendants of Seth, and it's like before long, the only thing that was going on was evil in somebody's heart all the time. So it was so bad, God decided, he regretted that he had even made man. So he decides to just wipe everybody out from the earth, except there's one man. Noah finds grace in the eyes of God, and he decides that he will save Noah. So he says, no, I want you to build this boat. And Noah says, right. And here the thing is really big, and all the animals come. And if you know the story, it's like it only takes him a mere 120 years to build the thing. And it's like Noah could sympathize with every man with his honey-do list that's not quite yet finished, that it seems like it's never going to get done because there's always something else. And he and his sons are at this for 120 years, and all the mockery that they take. And then when the flood comes, 40 days and 40 nights, it's like, this is actually one of Satan's deals. He knows how much God hates sin. So it's like if I can get God to wipe them all out, it'll cut down from a few million that might crush. Who is the one to come crush my head? Well, now it's down to just 8. So they get off the ark. Noah immediately is attacked. He plants grapes. He grows them. He makes some wine. He gets drunk. He lays naked in his tent. Satan is after him all over. Shem, Ham, and Japheth are the three sons. The seed will come through Shem. A few generations pass, and God appears to Abraham, a descendant of Shem in the Ur of the Chaldees, and he says, I want you to move to a place when I'm so imagine this. Abraham goes home, he tells Sarah, it's like, okay, honey, pack up, we're moving. Well, where are we going? Well, I don't know. And, well, when will we know when we get there? Well, God said he would tell me. So he's supposed to go all the way to the land of Canaan. He gets halfway to Haran, and he stops for 15 years, and God has to nudge him along, and he gets on down into the land. It's supposed to be a great land, and it's like, and then God gives the blessing, and Satan is listening. The blessing is, through your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And there was laughter in hell. All the nations are going to be blessed through this guy, and he's 99. His wife is 89, and they have no kids. I mean, it's like it's funny. That old man, you got this old man, Abraham, through his seed, his seed is going to come crush my head? I don't think so. In hell, they're wanting to pop the champagne and get the party going, and Satan goes, that might actually be a pretty good idea. And then 3 visitors visit Abraham on the plain, and he invites them for dinner. And during dinner, it's God and 2 of his angels, and God says, this time next year you will have a child. Well, Sarah's in the tent hiding behind the door doing her wifely duty of eavesdropping, and she hears that, and she laughs. And so when Isaac is born, Isaac means he laughs. This is hilarious right here. She's 89. She's never been able to have kids. The last time I noticed, people that are 89 aren't having kids anymore. It's like it was just very old. And it's like, so they have a son. So Isaac grows, and when he's about 30, Abraham is told to go sacrifice him on the mount. Satan thinks, this is really good. This is the only seed, and he's going to be sacrificed. Somewhere en route, Isaac must have figured this out. Dad, where's the sacrifice? They get up on the mount. He's laying on the altar. Abraham is figuring, if I do kill him, God will actually raise him from the dead right here. So Abraham brings the knife down. God stops him. They see a ram that just happens to be caught in the thicket right beside them. There's the sacrifice. And it's like, okay, I got to get Isaac. Well, Isaac has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau's a profane man. Jacob is a crook. Boy, Satan was all after them. It's like, let's get one of them to just be ridiculously bad, and let's get the other one to be so crooked that one of my old friends says the only place Jacob could get a good night's sleep was on a corkscrew if you could find one big enough. Then he says that's probably true. Well, I sort of doubt it, but it's like the guy was really a crook. So the seed is going to come through one of those. Satan is trying to own both of them. So which one is he going to actually own? Well, it's both. Until God takes Jacob and turns him into the prince of Israel. Boy, he puts him through all kinds of affliction. He goes in to find a wife, and he meets one that's really good looking, and then, her sister has a really good personality, and it's like the dad does a switcheroony on the wedding night and throws in the daughter with the good personality, and it's like, it was obviously dark because he would have seen that she wasn't the one that was good looking, so he has to work 7 years for the one he didn't want, 7 more years for the one that he did. Then they each have a handmaiden, and all 4 of them become his wives, and he has 13 kids, 12 sons and 1 daughter, and it's like, and he's all the time fighting with everybody. He's fighting with his father-in-law. His father-in-law says he's a crook. He says his father-in-law is a crook. They're both right. And then he wrestles with this stranger all night. And the stranger actually has to mess his hip joint up to stop it. He's fighting with God all night, and after that his name was changed from the deceiver. The actual word for Jacob means heel. Well, he was a heel. And now he's Israel. He has become the Prince of God. And Satan is counting, and Satan goes, okay, there's 12 sons. Which one is it? And it turns out that he attacks the oldest. Satan figures it's going to be the oldest son. Well, Reuben commits incest with one of the concubines, so he's out. Reuben and Simeon are next in line. They kill everybody in the town of Shechem because one guy from that town raped their sister Dinah. So they weren't going to have anything to do with that. So they figured, like, we're going to settle the score here. So they just killed everybody that was there. So they're out. Judah's the next one in line. He has incest with his daughter-in-law. And it's like, and for some reason, God picks him, and he says, the scepter will not depart from Judah, okay, until Shiloh comes, which means peace. So it's like Satan's paying attention. It's like, okay, it's going to come through Judah. So he's got to figure out, how do I wipe out all the descendants of Judah? So he figures on starvation. I mean, that would do it, right? But he decides he'll just starve all of them. So he's got this famine, this 7-year famine planned out in the future. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the little brother Joseph, who's the oldest son of the good-looking wife, is the favorite of his dad. Go figure on that one. And it's like his brothers are so tired of him being so egotistical and great. It's like he keeps having these dreams where everybody bows down and worships him. That wouldn't play too well. It wouldn't have in my family, and it didn't in theirs either. So they decide to lie to their dad. They put some animal's blood on a garment, on his coat of many colors. They sell him into slavery in Egypt, and they tell Dad that he was killed. Meanwhile, over in Egypt, he goes to work for Potiphar. Potiphar buys him. He's such a great administrator, he gets over all of Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife thinks he's just a knockout, so she comes along and she tries to seduce him, and he runs off out of there, and she grabs his coat, and so then she accuses him of it anyway. He gets thrown in prison. He's in prison with two guys that work for the king, the butler and the baker. They have dreams, and they say, we don't know what these dreams mean. He interprets the dreams because God gave him the ability to interpret the dreams. He tells the baker, well, you're going to be executed. He tells the butler, you're going to be restored to power. And by the way, when you get up there, would you remember me sitting in here? The butler does 2 years later because the king has a dream. The king has a dream about 7 fat cows, 7 lean cows. They all come up out of the Nile, and the lean ones eat the fat ones. It doesn't make any sense. And then there's all these stalks of good grain and some stalks of parched grain, and the bad grain eats the good grain. And it's like the king goes, what does this mean? So he calls all of his magicians and all of his sorcerers, and none of them can tell what it means. And the butler goes, there was a guy in prison that told our dreams. So they call for Joseph, and Joseph says, well, there's going to be 7 years of famine that's followed right after 7 years of plenty. So you better pile up as much food as you can for the next 7 years, or everybody is going to starve. So Pharaoh said, hey, that's really a good idea. And what's your name? Joseph. He said, Joseph, you're going to be in charge of all of this for me. And Joseph goes from prison. He gets sold as a slave. He gets falsely accused. He gets in prison, and then he goes to number 2 in the country of Pharaoh. In the whole country, 7 years, boy, they pile up lots of food. If that had not happened, the seed would have starved over in Canaan. So 7 years later, here his brothers come buying grain. He has been watching for them. Eventually, he reveals himself to them, and they think, oh, no, he's going to kill us for sure. And he said, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good, because there was a seed coming. So the seed is preserved. A few generations pass. Who's ever seen the book of Ruth in the Bible? Do you ever wonder why that story is there? Read the last couple of sentences and you'll know. She's the great-grandmother of somebody famous. Maybe it's David. That the great-grandmother of David's story just happens to wind up in the Bible. No coincidence at all, because this story of saved by one is just continuing on as we go. It's like Noah. You've got all these people, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Here we got Joseph, saves the whole nation. And now we've got David. He's just a lad. He's standing, and he looks across, and there's this giant he's decided to fight. Satan loves this, because what you've got is you've got the giant Goliath, and you've got this little guy, David, and Goliath is hurling insults at him, and he's saying, I'm going to feed your body to the birds of the air, and It's like, this is just not going to work. You come out here and you think you can do me. And if David had died right there, Satan would have almost won. So it's what a coincidence. He takes a stone in his sling. By the providence of God, he hits Goliath square in the forehead, knocks him out, takes Goliath's sword, cuts his head off while he's stunned. And it's like, and God makes a great man out of David. David is very far from perfect. Satan tempts him with everything. David says, God, I want to build you a house. God turns around and says, no, David, I'm making you a house. And now Satan knows. It's the descendants of David forever. I've got to go after the descendants of David. So Solomon comes, the seed line's going to come through Solomon. After Solomon, you've got a few generations will pass. And on the field of battle in the same day, Jehu, the new king of Israel, he kills both Joram, the old king of Israel, and Ahaziah, the king of Judah, on the same day. Two kings are gone. Well, down in Judah, this leaves Athaliah, the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab. Boy, what a lineage that is. Jezebel's the most evil woman that ever lived. She taught Athaliah, her daughter, pretty good. And Athaliah had married the king of Judah so they could combine their political deals with their countries together. And so Athaliah sees her chance to grab power right here because the king has died. You know, anytime there's a turnover in power, it's like people go scrambling to see what they can get. Of course, Satan is behind all of this, and what it says is Athaliah slew all the seed royal. Now, basically what that means is she gathers up all of her sons and all of her grandsons and all of their sons and anybody that's left that might possibly claim to be king. And she has them all killed because she wants the power. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, one of her daughters takes a little baby that's a year old, and they hide him in the temple for 6 years so Athaliah would not see him. Satan almost wins again. It gets down to just one again. This story is saved by one, away we go. You've got one of the daughters, knowing that all the princes were about to be killed, she saved the one. He becomes king. Joash becomes king when he's 6. Athaliah starts claiming treachery. They said, you know what, Athaliah, you're right. You were pretty treacherous. So they do away with her. Joash becomes king. A few more generations pass, and one of the descendants of Joash is a man named Hezekiah. He's a really good king. It's like when the nation split, all the kings in Israel were always bad. Half the kings in Judah were always bad. But Hezekiah was one of the really good ones. So one day he's sick, and Isaiah the prophet comes to see him, and he says, okay, God sent me to give you a message. Hezekiah said, okay, what is it? And he said, you're about to die. Have a good day. And he leaves. And Hezekiah was just so distraught. It's like, really? So he turns in his bed to the wall, and he starts sobbing and praying. Isaiah leaves. He gets halfway across the courtyard. God tells him, go back. Isaiah goes back, and he says, God has heard your prayer. He's going to give you 15 more years. Ka-ching. He gets 15 more years. Little did Hezekiah know that he was praying for you so you wouldn't be damned. And he was praying for the entire world so that Satan's head would actually be crushed. 15 years later, he dies. The first verse in the next chapter says, and his son Manasseh succeeded him as king at the age of 13. So if he had died right, Satan almost won again. Here we're down to just a single seed left. So through Hezekiah, the story of saved by one continues. In 715, the Assyrians come. They haul Israel off into captivity. They're gone. Several years later, actually in 3 different deportments, 587 being the last one, they leveled Jerusalem. 587, they haul them all into Babylonian captivity. The Persian Empire comes up, swallows Babylonia up. So all the seed is now in Persia. And Satan has to come up with a plan How am I going to take this seed all the way out? How am I going to kill the seed that's going to come crush man? Satan is really concerned about this head-crushing stuff. So it's like he's done before, he doesn't know really where the line went, so he hatches a plan to just kill them all. It's like, bless the Jews' hearts. Satan has been trying to kill every one of them throughout the history of the world. So here he is again. So there's the characters in this story are Mordecai, who's a godly man, and was one of the men elevated to be an advisor to the king of Persia. And he refuses to bow down to the proud peacock second in command of Persia, this guy named Haman. Haman will ride his chariot in the streets, and everybody will bow in homage to Haman, except Mordecai. So Haman hates him. Oh. So he goes to the king and he says, King, the king's name is Xerxes, and he says, Xerxes, there's a people that we have conquered that live, in our midst, and they really hate the king. They hate Persia. They hate everything we stand for, and it's like they're really evil, and something should be done about it. And the king says, well, what should we do? He said, well, on a certain date, let's just turn the army on them and just kill them all. The king says, pretty good idea. Write it up. They stamp it with the king's ring. It becomes law. And Mordecai is freaking out. The seed is all going to be killed. They're ready to pop the champagne corks in hell, and there's all kinds of laughter over there. And it's like, and there's a day that's set when the Jews will all be killed. So Mordecai, he doesn't really know what to do. The army comes back from the war at Thermopylae, and they're sort of licking their wounds in a way, even if it's one of those bad wars that if you won it, you actually lost. They lost a lot of men. Those 300 Spartans tore them up before they finally wiped them all out. It's like, I think they killed 20-something, 300 killed 20,000. It's like, so it's sort of hard to be joyous in a victory like that. So he calls all his big warlords together. They're in this huge arena. They have a drunken feast for a week. It's like, boy, that would really be fun. All these men drunk and, eating barbecue and drinking beer for 24 hours a day for 7 days. And so the king asked for his wife Vashti to come to dance the dance of the seven veils. She will be almost nude when she's finished. And I guess it's like the ancient rendition of a strip club, and it's like, that's just what they were. And Vashti said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he banished her from the kingdom. Well, a week later, he was sober, and it was like, that was his favorite wife. And I banished her. What in the world am I going to do? And some of his advisors say, well, have a queen contest and elect the most beautiful maiden in all the land will be, your next wife. And it just so happened, by the providence of God, that Mordecai's niece, Esther, wins a beauty pageant. And then this plot, Esther's going to be killed too on the day when they turn the army and sick it on them. And so Mordecai says, you got to go talk to your husband. Esther says, I haven't been called for 30 days. We can't just go visit him. I mean, they had a rule like this. So, so it kept down on all the wife nagging, I think, is really what the purpose of the world was. So if a wife comes to see the king unannounced, she'll be put to death unless he holds his scepter down. So that would cut down on it right there. So she says, well, I can't do that. I might lose my life. And her uncle says, yeah, but you know what? You may have been called to the kingdom just for a time as this so you can save your people. How do you know? And if you don't save your people right here, the story of Saved by One will not continue. He knew this too, that Satan's head would not be crushed. And she finally decides, I've got to take the chance and go see my husband. So she appears, and he holds the scepter down, and she touches it. And the king says, what can I do for you, Esther, up to half my kingdom? And she had a plan, because she knows if she tells him right then that Haman is trying to kill me, that it's going to be her word against Haman. And so she's smarter than that. And she also knows that a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So she says, I want to have a big feast tonight, and I just want you and Haman to come. The king said, okay, that's pretty cool. We'll be there. Haman is even more pompous and more proud and more egotistical than he's ever been, because now, he was telling his friends, it's like, hey, I can't play poker tonight because I got to go to this special dinner. Well, who's going to be at this special dinner? The king, Queen Esther, and me. So he goes to the dinner, and the king says, well, Esther, what is it that you want? She says, I want y'all to come to another dinner tomorrow night. So, okay, so it's like 2 dinners. It's like she knows it's not the right time to tell him yet. That night, 2 things happen. One is Haman decides he can't wait to kill Mordecai. He's planning on going and seeing the king first thing the next morning, seeing if he can't just hang Mordecai right then. He has this huge gallows built, 40 or 50 feet or more in height, right at his house. He wants everybody to see Mordecai swinging on that gallows when they hang him. That night, the king God's providence is unbelievable in this story. You've got the king with kingly insomnia. So, like, who's ever had insomnia? Anybody ever had insomnia? Yeah, it reminds me of one of my favorite jokes about what does a dyslexic, agnostic insomniac do? He lays awake at night wondering if there's a dog. So I suppose that's what the king was doing, but he can't sleep. Well, there's one surefire way to go to sleep if reading the phone book would do it for us. Reading the unabridged dictionary, that would definitely do it. But the king didn't have access to any of those, so he sent one of his servants to bring one of the scrolls from his library, which is in the hundreds of thousands of scrolls. So the guy just goes on the wall and he just picks a scroll out. The king says, start reading. He rolls the scroll out, the right scroll, the right place, and he reads about this plot to kill him that this Jew guy named Mordecai had uncovered, and the 3 guys that were going to kill the king had been executed. And the king goes, what have we ever done to honor that guy? They go like, you never even said thank you, sir. Maybe you should think about doing something nice for him. About that time, knock comes on the door very early in the morning. Haman is there, is asking for Mordecai's head. And the king says, Haman, I got a question for you. What should I do for somebody I really want to honor in this country? Well, Haman thinks it's him. So Haman thinks, what would I want? Haman says, well, put him on the king's horse, put the king's robe on him, take that ring that you seal all the laws with, put it on his finger, and have some state dignitary lead him on a ticker-tape parade through the streets and have everybody bow to the man the king wants to honor. And the king says, that is a fantastic idea. I would have never thought of any of that. So, Haman, you're a state dignitary. You lead the horse. And what's that guy's name? Mordecai. I want Mordecai on that horse. We're doing that parade today. So through the streets, can you see the look on Haman's face? He was not very excited. That night, Haman goes to banquet number 2, and the king says, Esther, you got to tell me right now what it is that you want to drive me crazy. And she says, I'm here to beg for my life because there's a plot against me and my people. And on a certain day, we're all going to be killed. And the king said, who set this up? She said, Haman. And the king said, why don't we take Haman and hang him on his own gallows? And the laughter in hell subsided. They didn't pop the champagne corks because the seat had been saved by one again, by a Jewish maiden. A few centuries pass, and an angel appears to this girl in the middle of the night, and he says, Mary, don't be afraid, but you're going to have a baby. And Mary says, I don't think so. I've never been with a man. I am engaged, but this wouldn't look right if I'm engaged and turn up pregnant. So, no. And the angel says, yes, because what's conceived will be by the Holy Spirit. And she says, but, we'll explain this to your husband. Okay? Angel goes to Joseph in the night and says, hey, Joseph, just thought we would let you in on something. Your wife's going to have a baby, but God did it. And you're to take care of her. And she's going to be the mother of the Christ. The Messiah will come. And so Joseph takes care of her. And in the course of time, when the baby is born, Satan, boy, is he paying attention to this, you know. I mean, Satan's sort of dumb in a lot of ways, but he knows that there's something going on in the stars. None of them miss that. Something crazy is going on in the star. They're seeing the star of Bethlehem. He sees these wise men making a trip. He hears the angels singing on the night that the baby is born. And now he knows. All this time, he'd been trying to kill the seed that would crush his head. He's been doing it for 42 generations, all the way on through, from Abraham to Christ, 42 generations. He's not been able to kill the seed yet. He's been waging this war with God. Every time he would do something, God always had a counter for it. It would get down to one person so many times, God would always save that one person. God's providence worked through all of this. But now it's down. He knows which one it is that will deliver the death blow and crush his head. So he doesn't wait around to see if he can kill him. So the wise men go to see Herod the Great. Herod the Great's really, really evil. Satan owns him. He's one of Satan's seeds. And Herod says, hey, when you find out where this king is, tell me. I want to go worship him too. No, he wanted to kill him. So Herod has all the babies in and around Bethlehem that are 2 and under, all the little boys. He has them all killed just so he can protect his kingdom on the earth, not knowing that Jesus' kingdom was not of this earth. God sends an angel again, appears to Joseph in the middle of the night and says, hey, Joseph, you better get up and take my son to Egypt. They do so. Jesus is spared. They stay in Egypt for 4 or 5 years. They come back, settle in Nazareth. He grows up there. They notice he's not any normal boy. He's actually very smart. He gets lost straightening all the Jewish leaders out. You know, when they're in Jerusalem one time when he's 11, and they fuss at him about, don't you know we'd already left town and you weren't with us and we had to come back and it caused us all this trouble? And he said, I've got to be about my Father's business. And they were like, ooh, okay. So he's baptized at age 30. Satan's pay attention to that too. The Spirit of God descends on him as a dove. God's voice from the clouds say, behold my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Hear ye him. And Satan calls him away into the wilderness to tempt him. Satan has managed to tempt everybody else that he wanted to into sin through all the centuries. He sort of knew on one level, unless the guy was really righteous, he was never going to crush my head anyway. So he just tries to get you to be evil. So Satan is really good at getting people to be evil. So he tells Jesus, you know, you hadn't eaten for 40 days, turn those stones into bread. Jesus said, it is written, you know, that you will not live by bread alone. And he fends the temptation off. And he says, he takes him up on high places and says, throw yourself down, you know, and I will save you. And he said, you can't tempt the Lord your God. And the third time, you know, I'll give you all these kingdoms. And Satan is like, ooh, I met my match here. This guy's not going to fall. A few years pass. Jesus says in the hearing of the Jews, which one of you convicts me of sin? Now, down here on the front row is a first cousin, a sister, and a brother. And I would never say that in front of them. I mean, imagine how embarrassed I would be if I said, which one of y'all convicts me of sin? And it's like it wouldn't take them very long. But nobody could say one single thing wrong about Jesus. One time in Nazareth, the people are so incensed at this man that Satan has got them all in a frenzy, and they're going to push Jesus off of a cliff and kill him. He just walks right through their midst because it wasn't time yet. They go to arrest him another time. They come back empty-handed. Where is he? We sent you to arrest him. They say, never a man so spake. Satan is trying to kill him, so when Jesus is hanging on the cross, suspending between heaven and earth, the laughter in hell is really turned up. Satan has been trying to kill this seed for all these centuries, and now finally he's going to kill him right here. He sees him dying. All Jesus had to do was speak the word, and legions of angels would have come and saved him. He did not say anything. He kept his mouth shut the whole time. He wouldn't even hardly defend himself against Pilate at all. He's sentenced. They turn his back into hamburger meat, his head into a pincushion. He's suspended between heaven and earth, and the party in hell is about to crank up. And he says, "It is finished." And he gives up the spirit. And they started celebrating in hell. Now, congratulations, Satan. It only took 42 generations since Abraham. It's all it took. But you finally got this seed that's going to crush your head. And he's dead. 3 days later, the party was still raging. And Satan couldn't find the keys of death and Hades anymore. I mean, imagine, if you've ever lost your keys, it's like maybe you can't drive your car, get into your house. But the key of death and of Hades, it seems like to me those two would be pretty important to hang on to. He couldn't find it because the tomb was empty and Jesus had been risen. And Revelation says, in so doing, he conquered Satan. And he took, read Revelation 1, he took the key of death and of Hades. Satan is just crushed. So it's like, you know why? Because it was always God's plan to save the world by one. Always. You know the verse that don't show it to him yet. Okay, I'm going to say the first 3 words of John 3:16. Y'all finish it. For God, that whoso would not perish, but have everlasting life. That was always God's plan. All the time Satan almost won. He was never going to win. His number is still 666. It's not 7. He can't win. He still can't win. And he didn't. Okay, and so now look at 17. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but what? To save the world through him. So life has come. It has come into the world. Now, I've got good news and bad news. That was the introduction to this sermon. The sermon's real short. The introduction was real long. Satan is after you. That's the bad news. He is after you. He will not give up trying to get you. So be careful. Okay? You need to be careful. But the best news is from Romans 16. Read this verse with me. Have we got it? There we go. I gave them 3 slides back there today. They were like, we can handle this, you know. Read it with me. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. Guess what? Jesus is not the only one that got to crush Satan's head. You do too. So do it every chance that you get.
Amen. Well, it's time for our offering. So let's stand up and worship as we